I always tell you that if you comment, I'll get back to you. Today, let's talk about the defense acquisition process, fraud, waste, and abuse, and all in response to a viewer comment. Let's get into it. Hello there, and welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the End of the Week National Defense and International Relations News Review and Opinion Podcast. It is I, your good friend, Morgan Houston, a.k.a. Whiskey Mo, the internet's least famous academic. I am a scholar of national defense policy, irregular warfare, water and security now. It grew. It continues to grow. Very excited to talk about this. We're going to talk about this right here, this comment, in a minute. But first thing I want to tell you that is I have a Patreon. I've had one for a while. I've had one before I even started this this particular podcast. But it was just something I kind of held in reserve that I never really did because I didn't know how I was going to utilize it. But right now, if you were to go and subscribe for the price of $1 a month, you can get this podcast one day early. One day early. It can't be really much earlier than that because then it won't really be a weekly thing that's up to date on the stories that I'm following this week. I record this during the week and then I drop it to the public on Saturday at noon Mountain Time. And if you subscribe to the podcast, $5, you can get it on Friday, noon Mountain Time. And I think that it's worth it, but also that's really just to help me kind of update, keep all this stuff going. There's a few things that I'd like to do for like long form video content, those kinds of things, and eventually get to the point where I could release those early on Patreon as well. But I'm still figuring this thing out. I'm fairly interested. Sorry, I've got a microphone, another additional microphone in my face right there that was popping up. But I'm still learning how to do some more of the long form edited content, not this podcast talk thing through. So anything helps. But as always, if you don't want to pay, this will always be free. The only difference is that it will be one day early. That is it. But yeah, thank you if you do join the Patreon. I look forward to it. But yeah, let me pull that back up. This comment right here. This is from a friend of mine. We've known each other for quite some time. He's always been supportive of a lot of the stuff that I've done. A previous podcast, some of my Discord stuff, some of my other YouTube stuff. He's a great guy, super smart dude. And this is a very sophisticated question that he's asking, and I really wanted to answer it. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the question is, what are your thoughts on the military budget, how to rebalance supporting the troops, and guarding against waste, fraud, and abuse? So in the military, it's actually generally called fraud, waste, and abuse. You'll see it very commonly in that order. It's something that we are always constantly battling against. It's very not common for massive fraud, waste, and abuse to be on the troop side, on the personnel side. There's a lot of things that we need to talk about. So what we're going to talk about today first is we're going to talk a little bit about defense acquisitions, about some of the categories, some of the processes, and then some of the things that I see that are needing to be fixed and how we continue to balance the budget. First off, as this was very cogent timing that my friend put it on there for, because I've been seeing a lot of videos that have come out in the last 2 weeks or so about the Department of Defense again failing another audit. This is 8 years in a row that the audit, the Inspector General has not passed it. And now it's not the Department of Defense and the IG doesn't necessarily say that you pass or you fail. What it is there is a notification that is given that is. Let me pull this up real quick and I will tell you what it means. But the idea is that the the independent auditors that are hired out will go through and give an opinion. It's a notice of an opinion that they cannot back up everything with 100% certainty. So the only organization throughout the DoD that has passed their audits has been the Marine Corps. That is partially because they're small, but also because they're Marines. But yeah, the auditors found 26 material weaknesses and 2 significant deficiencies related to DoD's internal controls over financial reporting. The review covered the department's $4.7 trillion in assets and another $4.7 trillion in liabilities. The Pentagon has failed every audit since launching its first agency-wide review in 2018. Congress has set a goal for the DoD to pass and achieve a clean audit by the fiscal year of 2028. We are about to reach fiscal year 2027. For those of you who don't know, the federal government operates on a fiscal year that begins in October. It's a very weird one. Fiscal years don't always align with calendar years. Ours here in the state of Colorado begins on July 1st and ends on June 30th. Yeah, June 30th. But yeah, there's a lot there. But as always, I'm going to have links to these in below. So what I was just reading was from the Federal News Network. It is a kind of quick blurb that's called the Federal Newscast. It is really good. But then I also found a website called ACNotes, and it's an essentially a wiki. It's an encyclopedia for defense acquisitions. I'm going to lean very heavily on that. I'm also going to attach the full report of the IG, the Inspector General. I have not fully read it. I've gone through the executive summary and a lot of the things, but it's almost a 200-page document. And I will warn you, I am not an economics or acquisitions expert. I dabble just because that's part of defense policy. And I think as a well-rounded scholar, you need to be able to dance to the tune if necessary to answer the questions, because these things are all tied in. I can't talk about irregular warfare or agriculture and security or air power without understanding how acquisitions affects those systems and those policies. So there are a couple of steps into this defense acquisition process, and I'm going to be putting some stuff up here in this corner as we get to it. The first thing to know is that Congress owns the power of the purse, right? That is placed in the Constitution. It is the fact that they are the ones that allocate money, and then the executive branch, the president and his agencies, are the ones who execute the decisions that have been passed into law by Congress. So when Congress passes a bill that says that the Department of Defense will get $1 trillion, the Department of Defense then has to act on that guidance of what this money will be spent for. Every year, the Secretary of Defense, the leaders of the 5 branches of the active military, because in peacetime, the Coast Guard operates under the Department of Homeland Security, and in war, they can operate underneath the Department of the Navy. So of the 8 uniformed services, there are 5 that belong to the military, and that is the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the Space Force, with the Marine Corps falling under the Department of the Navy and the Space Force falling under the Department of the Air Force. So they will ask and request money. The Congress will push forward through both the House and the Senate. Sometimes there's competing bills. Sometimes they work together and they go up, and it is one of the most important bills that passes every year is the defense budget. And then that budget is brought down into five major categories. And that is research, development, test, and evaluation, procurement, operation and maintenance, military personnel, otherwise known as MilPers, and military construction, also known as MilCon. So research, development, test, and evaluation, these are things that are testing new systems, testing new planes, new tanks, those kinds of things. Procurement, the purchasing of items and materiel, and even something as simple as desks and chairs. Operations and maintenance is exactly what it sounds. It is what pays for the operations, the training, the maintenance of materiel, of aircraft, of tanks, those kinds of things. MilPers is paying for the personnel and their paychecks and their training, those types of things. Military construction, exactly what it says on the tin. It is constructing all kinds of things. It could be repairing buildings. It could be building new bases. It could be all of this stuff. So these come in, and these funding comes to policies. Again, I'm going to share the link for Act Notes. It is phenomenal to understand so many of these things. They actually break it down better, and then they have links to other descriptions. So this is one of the really most important things. But part of it too is when we talk about acquisitions, when we buy things, there are 5 phases that go into it. There is a solution analysis. Essentially, a question is being asked, and we're analyzing the solution that comes for it. There is the technology maturation and risk reduction phase. Then there is the engineering and manufacturing development, the production and deployment, and then the operations and support. So the big ones come in. This is where we start to have requests for proposals, where the services will put out a request for people to come in and submit ideas and prototypes and those kinds of things. And it works through this process. And I think this is where it can get to be the most dangerous. I think right now, we've talked earlier in earlier episodes about what was the T-7, the aircraft for training that the Air Force has been working on purchasing. And I think this is in this process of the engineering and manufacturing development, the production, all of this is part of the procurement process, right? And this is where we have the most danger for both fraud, for waste, and abuse. And I think in most cases, it's mostly of a waste management issue where we, if it is fraud, it's things like they're undercutting prices, and then they end up ramping up and spending and charging more money to the government. This is where you get the jokes and the memes about the $10,000 toilet and the $5,000 candy bar and things like that. And it's easy for it to happen, right? Because it's easy, especially as we have shrunk down our prime contractors. Back in World War II, right at the end of World War II, we had about 75 what we call prime contractors. They are defense contractors who can do a lot of the big things. They were people like GE. And then eventually through mergers and acquisitions, through buyouts, we have brought them down to about 5. The big ones: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics. There's a Raytheon. There's another big one. These are names that are, if you pay attention in the defense space, they're probably familiar to you. And honestly, Boeing is famous for other reasons outside the defense space, which is not a good thing there. But they don't necessarily do everything in-house. A lot of times they will subcontract out to other contractors, and then that is part of the problem that we saw with the T-7 development, was the fact that not everyone was talking to each other, and then the Air Force had to decide that they were going to buy engines on their own, and they were going to supply them, and this is the kind of thing that leads to fraud, waste, and abuse. And I think one of the biggest things that we can do to limit the dangers of fraud, waste, and abuse is having stricter and tighter controls on these systems. The bureaucracy is an important aspect. Like, you need to have a level of bureaucracy that can work its way through these changes and to pay attention to what is happening. But there needs to be checks and balances throughout this entire process. We need to strengthen the inspector generals and allow them to audit these processes, not just having a once-a-year audit of the entire DoD. Within the acquisitions offices of the DoD, there is an undersecretary of defense for acquisitions, and within there needs to be part of the regular DoD IG, which is supposed to be an independent body that is supposed to be a place where people can go and report, or they do investigations to make sure that people are following federal law on these things. You need to make sure that they have very robust investigative service. I would actually recommend putting 1800 series investigators. Those are the same federal job code as FBI agents, federal marshals, ATF agents, giving them the full authority to investigate and arrest when federal laws are broken. And also, there needs to be structures and timeframes. And the companies need to be held to account when they bust those timelines, right? There needs to be financial penalties. There needs to be reputational damage. The biggest thing is that there's no reason or way for the federal government necessarily, or there hasn't been applied penalties, because we have to go back to these manufacturers and to these prime contractors. It's one of my biggest complaints, and it's something that I've talked about on here before, is that we need to broaden out the amount of prime contractors. And it's something that I have lauded the Trump administration for, is that they are trying to revise and revamp the defense industrial base, which is a really important thing to do, because when we have more contractors that are vying for contracts, we have a more robust system, and we're going to have better pricing. We're going to have better engineering. All of these things, these are natural things that this is a case where markets can work. And for those of you who know me, that is a statement that most people would be a little bit shocked for me to see. But the thing is that we have to, the defense industrial base generally works on the lowest bidder, right? It's why so many veterans chuckle when you see someone touting something that's military grade as this like badass thing, when everything that we purchase comes from the lowest bidder. But we need to ensure that even with the lower cost, we still get the quality product that we need. And I think this is really important. And I think this is one of the ways that we can do it, is we need to make sure that as we are going through these defense acquisition processes, that we are doing our best to make sure that we are keeping everything above board. And one of the problems with this too is that not everything is going to be public knowledge. Part of budgeting, and now not necessarily for the defense, but even in the defense budget, there is classified sections for special operations capabilities, for our national mission units, our special mission units. And there's also crossover with some of the black budgets for things like CIA, NSA, DIA, things like that, where there's crossover. And there's always a danger for fraud, waste, and abuse within anything that is classified. There is a reason that the term or the phrase is sunlight is the best disinfectant. And the idea is that things need to be open to the public, to inspection. That's why we have journalists, why we have whistleblower accounts, because that is how we know that these things are happening. I just think that at this point, we have allowed contractors, the prime contractors, to get too much. Lobbying is way too much of a thing. The problem is the web and the tentacles of fraud, waste, and abuse is a huge thing, that the tentacles go out and intersect on many things. There are so many senators and congressmen who are beholden to the lobbyists of the defense industry, amongst many others. There are issues when it comes to some of the more famous scandals with the Navy have been about acquisitions, about admirals moving ships and playing favorites for like operations and maintenance contracts for fleets and ships and ports. And they at least have gotten caught and have been prosecuted, and they have gotten they've had consequences. But I think the biggest thing that we need to do is to make sure that we are having strict enforcement of federal law when it comes to the acquisitions process. So there's a super brief bit on defense acquisitions. If you want to learn more, go ahead, check all the things that I'm going to put in the description. I'm going to have I will put 3 links from Act Notes. I will put the main page. I will put the appropriation categories and the defense appropriations phases in there. I will also put a link to the FNN, the Federal News Network story that is a little blurb. And then I will also put a primer on defense acquisitions from Congress. The Congressional Research Service has got a really good, hey, this is a primer, you can learn how to do it. And then also from the comptroller, the fiscal year 25 agency financial report from DOD. That was cool. I was so excited to see that from my boy. And thanks as always for being a valued member of the audience, my man. Please engage. This is what I love to do. I love to teach people about the things that I work on, that I research. I really love to know. One quick thing that I really wanted to address here at the end We're seeing some shenanigans from the Trump administration. I know I gave them some praise a little bit earlier in the podcast, but they are reclassifying some of the deaths in Iran or that are being from the conflict with Iran as not from the first one to they're classifying as operations overseas. And I'm very concerned about that. One, they're trying to play political games with this body count by saying that this is a new operation, that the ceasefire ended the old one. This way they can continue the conflict without having to seek out congressional approval for continuing the war. But my concern is that what happens to the families of these service members if they are married or have partners or have kids, because I don't want them to lose out on the benefits that come with the unfortunate death of a service member. So something to be aware of. I don't like any time that the deaths of service members are used as a political pawn or a political tool or as a game. When we put on the uniform, we raise the right hand to swear and uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And we have now become a political football. And we always have been, but even more so in the last 40 years or so. And I just want to say that I want to make sure that people are aware of it and want people to know that my thoughts are with the families of those lost service members. We are now over 18 deaths in the Operation Epic Fury. I think 400 injuries. And that's just on the American side. We're not counting the deaths of Iranian military members and civilians, as well as those in other nations that are unfortunately the collateral damage of this. So I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that as you were going through the day. And as always, if you guys are interested in these things, you can always reach out. Or if you want to be advocates for stuff like this, you can write your congressman, you can phone your congressman, those kinds of things. But as always, if you found value in this, please gently caress that like button. It really does help. I do love to know that people find some value out of this. I get value out of it by just talking about it. As I do more research, as I learn more, learning is a never-ending thing. Once you learn how to learn, you kind of just become a sponge and it becomes enjoyable. Also, please hit the subscribe button or the follow button on Spotify if you're listening. That knows that more people find interest in this and that they will put it out to viewers just like you. Also, please comment. If you have questions about this story, if you have stuff that you see or you want me to talk about, put it in the comments. I will make an episode about it. I promise you. I promise you that. I will do my best, unless we get to the point where I need help and with people scanning the comments. But then I don't think we'll ever get to that point. But if you want to know when new episodes come out or when one of my long form videos come out, go ahead and hit the notification bell. That way you know when everything drops. I haven't seen it, but I've heard it from other YouTubers that I watch that the algorithm is more geared towards short form content. So if you want to know exactly when it comes out, go ahead and hit that notification bell. It will let you know when things are popping. If you would like, join the Patreon, $5 a month. You will get every episode a day early. And it helps me out, as this is, as much as crazy as it is, it's not cheap. Even once you've bought it, maintaining all of those things, hell, electricity to do all this stuff gets expensive sometimes. But as always, thank you so much for joining us. I just really, really do enjoy this, especially when you guys reach out to me. And I hope to see you again at the end of the week.